Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world of lantern light and creaking timbers, where the deck beneath your boots rocks in rhythm with the endless sea. The air tastes of salt, the ropes creak in the wind, and in the darkness you swear you hear whispers of men long gone. This is the world of pirates, not the polished Hollywood kind with eyeliner and witty banter, but the ones who lived with hunger, fear, and the constant temptation of glittering gold. You're stepping onto a ship where treasure, torture, and survival were stitched into every waking moment. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this journey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching right now, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far across the map this little corner of storytelling reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The deck tilts slightly as you steady yourself, hearing the distant growl of thunder. It's midnight, the hour when the sea seems most alive, and you realize this ship is less a vessel and more a floating gamble. Every man here has wagered his life against the promise of treasure. You imagine the eyes of kings and governors staring at maps in candlelit chambers, desperate to protect their riches, while in contrast, these pirates huddle in shadows, plotting how to take it all. History tells us that the golden age of piracy stretched roughly between 1850 and 1730, when trade routes brimmed with silver, sugar, and slaves. But here's the odd truth. Pirates didn't live in a constant gold glitter frenzy. Most of the time, they fought and bled for barrels of rum, stacks of cloth, or even dried fish. Scholars still argue whether the true lure was the promise of sudden wealth or the sheer thrill of freedom from kings and laws. Either way, you feel the pull, the dangerous charm of living outside society's leash. The lantern sways, throwing long shadows across the deck. You notice scars on the faces around you, missing teeth, and tattoos inked in crude designs. These aren't men who left home with clean records and neat futures. They're deserters, escaped convicts, or sailors too poor to matter to anyone but each other. And yet, there's an energy in their laughter, sharp, reckless, like men who know tomorrow isn't guaranteed. You catch yourself half smiling, half shivering at the thought that this is what survival looks like when the horizon is endless and death is always lurking. Somewhere in the captain's cabin, there's a locked chest. You picture it. Maybe it holds Spanish silver, maybe just a bundle of mats and dried tobacco. Pirates rarely buried treasure, despite the stories. They spent it fast, on drink, women, or weapons. The legend of X marks the spot is fun bedtime fuel, but here on this creaking deck, you understand why it probably never happened. When you might be dead in a week, saving for tomorrow isn't exactly a priority. You lean against the railing, staring out at the sea, an endless sheet of black glass with the moon dragging a silver scar across it. Somewhere out there lies another ship, sails full of cargo, men unaware of what waits in the dark. You feel a strange tension rising in your chest, the mix of fear and thrill, because in this world, treasure doesn't just glimmer. It drips with blood. The storm growls louder. Rain lashes across your face as the deck explodes with motion. Pirates scramble, ropes tightening, sails fighting against the wind. You cling to the mast, feeling the ship groan beneath you, and it occurs to you that this, more than bullets or blades, is the real enemy, nature itself. And in that roar of thunder, you realize that your story here is only just beginning. The storm drifts behind you, leaving only the hiss of waves and the taste of damp salt in the air. Lanterns flicker back to life, shadows dancing across the wet deck, and you find yourself staring at faces still taut with adrenaline. No one here claps or cheers when the danger passes. Survival is so routine, it hardly deserves applause. Instead, the men slump back into their rhythms, whispering, sharpening blades, and letting the silence of the sea reclaim the night. It doesn't take long before your thoughts turn toward treasure. That word alone, treasure, hums like a fever in every man's bones. It's the fuel behind every mutiny, every sleepless night, every reckless dive into violence. You'd expect pirates to be driven purely by hunger or desperation. But it's more complicated than that. You feel the pull yourself, just standing among them. A glimpse of silver coins, or a whisper of gold bars, and suddenly the whole ship vibrates with greed. The allure of hidden gold wasn't just about the wealth. It was about what the wealth represented. Freedom, power, the chance to spit in the face of every king, governor, and merchant who lived by rules pirates rejected. You imagine yourself holding a single Spanish doubloon in your palm. The coin is heavy, warm from your skin, and worth more than months of honest sailors' wages. Now multiply that by a chest full of them, glimmering like captured sunlight. You understand why men risked hanging, torture, and death for such a prize. And yet, here's the mainstream fact that historians love to remind us of. Most pirates never saw mountains of gold. They chased ships laden with sugar, tobacco, spices, and cloth. Still valuable, yes, but hardly the shimmering hoards you see in paintings. Even when pirates did capture gold or silver, it was often in smaller amounts than legend suggests. Scholars still argue whether we exaggerate their riches because of ballads and novels, or if there truly were a few jackpot raids that set imaginations on fire for centuries afterward. A quirky detail slips into your thoughts. The Spanish galleons, those lumbering treasure ships, carried so much silver from the Americas that global economies literally bent under the weight. Whole kingdoms rose and fell because of these coins. Imagine that, one heavy chest of silver sitting in the hold of a single ship could ripple across oceans, changing the price of bread in far-off markets. You realize now why pirates dreamed so feverishly of those galleons, even if catching one was almost impossible. As you drift through this night, you sense how the myth of treasure grew larger than the reality. Even rumors of gold were enough to send crews chasing shadows for weeks. Picture a pirate captain at dawn, map spread on the table, whispering of a prize ship sailing from Havana, rich with silver. Whether it was true didn't matter. The idea was enough. You feel that same itch now, your fingers restless, your heart racing at the thought that just beyond the horizon lies wealth, so dazzling it could burn away every hardship. And yet, the allure is tainted by paranoia. You hear scraps of stories about men who found treasure, only to die violently before enjoying it. A chest of gold could turn brother against brother. It could tempt crews into mutiny, spark duels on the deck, or drive men to betray their captain in exchange for pardon from the crown. Treasure was never safe, even once you had it. The air grows cooler, the stars hard and bright above you. You look at the horizon and wonder, would you risk your life, your freedom, even your soul, for the promise of glittering gold? Around you, every pirate already has. That's why they're here, sailing into storms, chasing shadows, and living on the razor's edge of survival. The allure of hidden treasure isn't a fantasy. It's the very heartbeat of this ship. And as the lantern light sways, you can't shake the suspicion that somewhere below deck, in a locked chest you haven't yet seen, something gleams waiting to decide whether tonight ends in fortune or in blood. The ship rocks gently now, calm after the night's chaos, and you catch the faint scrape of wood on wood as chests are shifted below deck. Curiosity pulls you toward the hold, where the air grows thick and sour, a stew of tar, sweat, and old rope. Lantern light catches on the edges of objects scattered across the cramped space, and you quickly realize treasure isn't always glittering gold. Sometimes it's dull, practical, and surprisingly ordinary. You imagine the excitement as a captured ship is picked apart, not for glowing piles of coins, but for the things that keep a pirate crew alive. Bolts of cloth, barrels of salted fish, dried beans, or coils of rope. These mundane prizes mattered just as much as silver. A pirate ship was less a floating vault of treasure and more a recycling bin of stolen necessities. You watch as rough hands pry open crates to reveal things like tobacco leaves pressed into bricks or jars of oil, and you understand. Survival required looting anything with value, not just the shiny stuff. There's a strange delight in spotting odd items too. A carved ivory comb, a small chest filled with medicinal herbs, even a basket of lemons, quickly snatched up before scurvy could claim more teeth. You realize treasure had many faces, and often it was the little things that made men cheer the loudest. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Pirate hauls often included mundane goods like flour, sugar, and alcohol, because merchant ships carried far more of those than precious metals. Without them, pirate life would grind to a halt. What's fascinating is how those goods could instantly become treasure, depending on circumstance. On a starving ship, a barrel of biscuits was worth more than a chest of pearls. But the quirky detail? Pirates sometimes looted books. Imagine rough, scarred men hauling away leather-bound volumes of law, science, or even romance novels. Some used them as kindling or toilet paper, but others kept them, passing the time reading by lantern light. There are fragments of evidence suggesting a few pirates were more literate than the stereotypes admit, though scholars still argue whether this was common or just a rare quirk among more educated captains. The lantern flame sputters as you glance around, and your mind lingers on the image of coins versus necessities. Gold made men dream, but bread and water kept them breathing. A pirate ship, then, was always balanced between fantasy and reality. They chased silver and jewels, yes, but they also snatched chickens, tools, even clothing. Imagine the chaos of splitting a pile of silk shirts among men who hadn't bathed in weeks, laughing as one tries on lace cuffs while another swings a jeweled goblet like a trophy. You notice how quickly the mood shifts as barrels are rolled onto deck and pried open. Men grow restless, bickering, and then roaring with laughter at the odd mix of plunder. One shoves a jar of olives into another's hand. Another sneaks a sip from a stolen bottle. It's chaotic, messy, and utterly human. You begin to see that pirate treasure wasn't about sparkling piles neatly stacked. It was a chaotic jumble of survival, indulgence, and sometimes plain absurdity. Outside, the night breathes steady. You feel the ship settle into its rhythm again. Cargo secured, stomachs slightly fuller, spirits temporarily lifted. Yet the deeper truth creeps in. No matter what's stolen, it never lasts long. Food rots, rum disappears down thirsty throats, and cloth frays. Even gold burns fast when temptation is everywhere. That's why the chase never ends, why every horizon whispers of the next prize. You lean back against a barrel, the wood damp beneath your palms, and realize the strange paradox of pirate life. Treasure is both survival and downfall. It feeds the body while poisoning trust. It sparks laughter, even as it seeds betrayal. And as you close your eyes for a moment, hearing the creak of the hull, you can almost feel the weight of 100 stolen objects pressing down on this ship. Not just loot, but the burden of living by plunder alone. The stories you've heard about buried treasure probably make you picture isolated islands, marked maps, and chests overflowing with coins glinting under the sun. You wander along the deck, imagining a sandy shore and an X scrawled in ink somewhere nearby. But the truth is far murkier. Pirates rarely buried treasure, and scholars still argue whether the few accounts of hidden hoards are exaggerations or isolated acts of desperation. Often, gold was spent as quickly as it was taken, vanishing into the hands of tavern keepers, prostitutes, or fellow pirates. You pause to picture a young crew member trudging along a quiet beach, spade in hand, sweat dripping into the sand as he digs. He's following a captain's vague instructions: bury it where the sun kisses the tallest palm at noon. Absurdly specific, perhaps, but the fear of being caught or returning to find it stolen was real. Many would die before ever reclaiming the treasure, leaving legends behind for later generations. And sometimes, the buried treasure was less about wealth and more about hiding personal items. A mother's locket, a favored weapon, or a small stash of letters. Here's a quirky detail. Some pirates supposedly buried treasure just to create a story for negotiating with other pirates later. Imagine a captain grinning as he whispers, "Ah, you'll find it under the old oak," knowing no one alive could ever track it down. Scholars still debate whether such acts were clever manipulation or just whimsical superstitions. Either way, you feel the lure of treasure isn't just monetary, it's psychological. The idea of wealth, dangling like a carrot, keeps men on edge, eager and often reckless. The myth of X marks the spot is mostly Hollywood. You can picture the frustration of men carrying maps with vague symbols and no scales, forced to interpret half-faded ink. Sometimes, treasure maps didn't even exist. They were tales, recycled and exaggerated over drinks in taverns, used to scare or excite crews. Yet the promise was enough to make men risk storms, capture, and death. You feel the tension, as if the horizon itself is whispering, promising either fortune or doom. Treasure wasn't just gold. It was objects, sometimes mundane, that carried meaning. A fine sword from a Spanish officer, barrels of cured meat, rare fabrics, all could be considered treasure in the moment. And yet, the obsession with gold persists in your imagination. You recognize it, even while leaning against the railing, watching waves glitter silver under the moon. It isn't about the coins themselves. It's about what they allow: freedom, power, survival, and a little bit of myth-making. The crew's laughter drifts up from below deck, carrying the sound of men debating who will get which portion of the plunder. Gold, silver, spices, and food all intermingle in their quarrels, a constant reminder that treasure's value depends entirely on who controls it and how quickly it can be used. You note the strange irony. The more treasure a pirate had, the more enemies he invited. Trust is fragile when money glimmers in the palm, and betrayal often comes faster than sunrise. As you drift along the deck, moonlight glinting off a copper coin someone dropped, you begin to understand why pirates were obsessed with hidden treasure. It was never just gold or silver. It was control, hope, and a fleeting sense of immortality. Even if you only possess it for a few days, it feels like mastery over the world, a momentary escape from the constant terror of storms, hunger, and the law. The night presses close around you, filled with the soft sounds of the ship, and the lesson lingers. Treasure isn't just a reward. It's a risk, a burden, and a story in itself. And as you imagine the chests, maps, and faint glimmers of coins buried or lost, you realize that the allure of treasure, like the sea, is endless, simultaneously beautiful, dangerous, and utterly irresistible. You step back from the imagined map and survey the crew's antics, realizing that treasure isn't just collected, it's divided, argued over, and sometimes fought for. Pirate codes, written or whispered, governed these distributions. And they were surprisingly democratic for men who spent their lives outside law. Each hand on deck knows exactly what their share will be, often detailed in a contract signed by the crew. You feel the tension of anticipation, as if the next chest opened might be yours, though you know, in truth, no one can ever claim ownership for long. The division of plunder is ritualistic. Coins are counted, barrels of rum measured, and oddities, a sword here, a fabric bundle there, assigned with absurd precision. You watch a tall pirate point at a jar of pickled vegetables and argue over who deserves it, and it strikes you as both ridiculous and profoundly human. These disputes, often noisy and chaotic, are the glue that binds crews together, a strange social contract forged under danger, greed, and shared survival. Here's a historical fact. Pirate crews had formalized shares, usually codified in what was called the Articles of Agreement. Captains often received 2 shares for every one of a regular crew member, while surgeons, carpenters, or other specialists received slightly more than the average sailor. You marvel at how structured this seems for men living beyond the law, exposed to storms and cannon fire. Even in chaos, order finds a way. Scholars still argue whether these codes were strictly followed or more aspirational than practical. The quirky detail you notice involves the bonus system. Some pirates awarded extra coins or goods to those who displayed courage in battle or ingenuity during a raid. Imagine a man diving into enemy hold to grab a chest of sugar, returning soaked and bruised, only to receive a handful of coins and a wink from the captain. It's a strange blend of risk and reward, almost like a casino at sea, except the stakes are life itself. You sense that the process of dividing treasure does more than satisfy greed. It builds identity. Each pirate knows their rank, their privileges, and their responsibilities. Mutiny, although a threat, is also a constant check. You glance at a young deckhand, nervously holding a few coins he thinks are his alone. He'll learn quickly that in this world, even tiny lapses in honesty can lead to disputes sharp enough to cut. Pirate life hinges on these rituals. A barrel of sugar might seem insignificant, yet it carries calories, currency, and respect. You imagine crews meticulously measuring the spoils, coins clinking, men grumbling, laughing, or swearing as each division is finalized. The meticulousness seems almost absurd given the constant threat of storms, disease, or capture. Yet it's what keeps the ship functioning. You lean against the railing, watching the horizon where the dark sea meets a black sky. Even in the quiet moments, the thought of treasure dances through your mind, not just the physical wealth, but the system, the fairness, the rules that bind men together. There's a strange comfort in it, almost like the sea itself obeys its own set of invisible codes. And as the lanterns sway, illuminating worn faces and rough hands, you understand the duality of treasure. It brings joy and conflict, life and death, hope and betrayal. Even a single chest, shared fairly, can inspire loyalty. Shared badly, it can ignite mutiny. It's a delicate balance, and watching it play out, you realize that dividing treasure is as dangerous and exhilarating as seeking it in the first place. The moment the last coin clinks into its assigned pile, a hush falls over the deck, but it doesn't last long. Discipline aboard a pirate ship is fragile, held together by fear, respect, and the occasional gleam of a blade. You notice how quickly whispers turn into threats and threats into action. The brutality of pirate justice is never far from the surface, and you can feel it in the tension of each glance, the stiff stance of every man with a knife at his hip. Pirate punishment is swift and public. You picture a man accused of stealing from the chest, bound to the main mast, while the crew encircles him. The captain steps forward, voice low but firm, and you sense the electric anticipation. Punishments range from flogging to keel hauling and sometimes to marooning on deserted islands. You shiver, realizing that these punishments aren't just about retribution. They're lessons carved into the memory of everyone aboard. Scholars still argue whether such severity was necessary for order or simply cruelty masquerading as discipline. A quirky detail emerges in your mind. Pirates sometimes carried a jury of crew members to decide the severity of punishment. This wasn't just justice, it was theater. A reminder that while chaos reigned, rules existed, and you, standing in the shadows, feel the tension, the fear, and a twisted thrill all at once. You imagine the swaying lantern light highlighting scars, tattoos, and haunted eyes, each mark a testament to past lessons learned the hard way. The punishment doesn't just target the guilty, it's a warning. One lash, one drop into a shark-infested cove, and the others understand the cost of betrayal. You sense the psychology at play. Fear keeps a ship functioning, binds a crew together, and enforces a fragile democracy. It's messy, brutal, and utterly effective. And yet, even in its horror, there's a peculiar kind of fairness. The same rules often apply to captain and deckhand alike. You wander past the main mast in your imagination, noting the subtle hierarchy that underpins chaos. Even a seasoned pirate captain can be challenged if his decisions endanger the crew or mismanage the plunder. The Articles of Agreement serve not only to divide treasure, but also to justify punishment, creating a balance between authority and rebellion. Quirky as it sounds, this blend of democracy and terror is what keeps the ship alive. Mainstream historical fact reminds you that piracy wasn't anarchy in the pure sense. Discipline and law existed, albeit wrapped in violence and spectacle. The fear of punishment was often enough to enforce compliance. You feel it now, imagining the weight of a whip, the rattle of chains, and the hushed whispers of those waiting their turn to act or intervene. Here's the oddest part. Some punishments were bizarrely symbolic. Imagine a man forced to wear a makeshift fool's cap for a day, humiliated before the crew. Or another, tied up with a fish around his neck, paraded on deck to the crew's amusement. Odd, perhaps, but effective. Morale, fear, and obedience intertwined in a strange dance you can almost hear, creaking with every sway of the ship. The night deepens, lanterns flicker, and the stories of punishment echo faintly across the deck. You realize the dual nature of pirate justice, cruel enough to terrify, structured enough to maintain order, and theatrical enough to remind every man that survival depends on adherence to rules. And as the wind whistles through the rigging, you shiver not from cold, but from the realization that life aboard a pirate ship teeters constantly between freedom and peril. The deck feels emptier now, the echo of punishment fading into the night air, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the gentle sway of the ship. You lean against the railing, imagining the terrifying ordeal of marooning, one of the harshest punishments in pirate lore. A man is left alone on a deserted island or sandbar, often with little more than a pistol and a few rounds of ammunition. You shiver at the thought. Survival here is a gamble with nature itself, and the odds are never in your favor. Being marooned is less about vengeance and more about deterrence. Scholars still argue whether pirates used this as a calculated measure of fear or simply as cruel expedients when no other punishment seemed appropriate. The unlucky sailor must endure scorching sun, hunger, thirst, and isolation, relying on wit and desperation to stay alive. You feel the tension, imagining the solitude and uncertainty pressing down like the midday sun, relentless and unforgiving. Here's a quirky detail. Sometimes the victim is left with a small bag of provisions, a canteen of water, a few biscuits, maybe even a compass. This was rarely a gift. It was a test. Could he survive long enough to return and tell the tale? Or would the sea claim him quietly, leaving the crew to whisper stories of his fate? You can almost hear the man's footsteps fading into the sand, the tide slowly encroaching on his only source of sustenance. The cruel irony of marooning is that it combines punishment with survival skill. A clever, resourceful sailor might find fresh water, edible plants, or shelter from the sun. You imagine him constructing crude traps for small animals, fashioning makeshift tools, and scanning the horizon desperately for passing ships. Even here, in absolute isolation, human ingenuity shines. The same ingenuity that allows pirates to survive storms, mutinies, and battles. Mainstream historical fact reminds us that marooning was often a sentence passed for mutiny, theft, or betrayal. Yet it was also symbolic, a stark reminder to the rest of the crew about the price of disobedience. You picture the men on deck, watching silently, knowing that the ghost of the marooned sailor will haunt their conscience as a living warning. Scholars still debate whether marooned men were often rescued, or if most perished quietly, swallowed by the sea and sand alike. Your imagination drifts to the psychological weight of isolation. Even the strongest sailor can falter when deprived of human contact. Hours stretch into days, nights become endless, and the sound of the wind is both a companion and a tormentor. The mind begins to wander in strange ways, conjuring hallucinations, whispering fears, and testing sanity itself. You shiver thinking about the mental fortitude required to endure such punishment, and the luck needed to survive. Yet pirates sometimes injected a small dose of theater into the ordeal. Legends tell of leaving a single item behind. A pistol loaded with one shot, or a note with cruel instructions. It's a strange, almost playful cruelty that makes the punishment more memorable for both victim and observer. You sense the twisted humor and dark practicality intertwined, as if the ship itself enforces its own rules through spectacle. By the time you lean back and take a deep breath, you feel the duality of marooning settle in. Its punishment and survival lesson wrapped in one, terrifying in its simplicity. You realize that, for pirates, every day at sea carries this delicate balance: freedom, danger, and the constant reminder that even a misstep can leave you stranded against the relentless forces of nature. The waves lap quietly now, a deceptive lull that makes your skin prickle with anticipation. Every shadow might conceal treasure or peril, and the story of the marooned sailor lingers in your mind like a soft warning. In the world of pirates, isolation is as deadly as any blade. You step into the dim light of the hold again, imagining the most inventive forms of torture pirates ever devised. It's not just about punishment. It's about making an example so that fear seeps into every corner of the ship. You can almost hear the creak of ropes, the snap of a whip, the muffled groans as captives and crew alike witness what happens to those who cross the line. Scholars still argue whether some of these methods were widespread or the product of exaggeration, but the tales themselves are enough to make your skin crawl. Pirates were surprisingly creative. Beyond the typical flogging or keel hauling, they sometimes used psychological tactics designed to terrorize. Imagine a man forced to sit with a weight pressing on his chest for hours while the rest of the crew watches, or tied in positions that strained muscles painfully yet left him alive. These were lessons in endurance as much as punishment. You shiver imagining the ingenuity, brutal, almost theatrical, that turned ordinary tools into instruments of dread. A quirky detail emerges in your mind. Some pirates used branding irons not just to punish, but to send messages. Letters or symbols burned into the skin signified treachery, cowardice, or theft. You can picture the crude, smoking iron pressed to skin, the acrid smell filling the air. The victim gritting his teeth as laughter and curses fill the deck. Oddly, these marks sometimes became badges of notoriety, a twisted kind of pride among hardened pirates. Mainstream historical fact confirms that torture served as both discipline and deterrence. You feel the tension as you imagine a captain explaining the rules, one eye flicking toward every crew member to ensure the lesson sinks in. The method chosen often reflected the captain's personality, ruthless, calculating, sometimes even oddly poetic in cruelty. Scholars still debate whether this fear-based system truly ensured loyalty, or merely bred resentment and mutiny waiting for an opportunity. You wander past the ropes and barrels in your imagination, picturing the grotesque devices that might have been improvised in the ship's hold. Shackles from stolen chains, hooks bent from cargo, heavy weights dangling from masts, all used to remind men that failure had a tangible, painful consequence. And yet, the creativity speaks to a strange ingenuity. Pirates were survivors, engineers of terror, who understood that fear could control more effectively than bullets. You sense the psychological nuance at play. Observing torture trains the mind in a delicate dance of obedience and dread. One slip, one miscalculation, and you could be the next subject. Even seasoned sailors glance around nervously, reminding themselves that discipline aboard a pirate ship is a spectacle as much as a rule. You feel a shiver run through your spine, imagining yourself in their boots. The knowledge that survival depends not only on skill, but on careful navigation of fear. And then there's the quiet after. The screams fade. The ship rocks gently, and the crew disperses, tension easing but never vanishing entirely. The memory lingers in the shadows, a soft warning echoing through the lantern-lit corridors. You realize that for pirates, torture was more than pain. It was theater, education, and a stark reminder of the cost of betrayal. It's brutal, yes, but it's also survival. And tonight, standing in that dim hold, you understand why stories of pirate cruelty have haunted imaginations for centuries. The chill of the night settles back over the deck, and your thoughts drift toward one of the most dreaded outcomes for any pirate: capture and the noose. You picture the slow march toward a gallows, the creaking rope swaying above, and a crowd of civilians gawking at every twitch of the condemned. You feel the gravity of it all pressing down, heavier than the heaviest chest of treasure. Because this is not just a punishment. It's a public spectacle designed to terrify and shame. Scholars still argue whether the fear of execution was more effective at controlling crews than pirate-imposed justice. Pirates feared the noose more than storms, cannons, or rival crews because it was final. No cunning, no skill, no stolen chest could save you once the law's arm found you. You imagine standing on the deck, eyes blindfolded, ropes at your wrists, heart hammering as the plank tips away. It's simple, elegant in its cruelty, and completely unambiguous. Death is absolute, and the message clear: cross the line, and there is no coming back. A quirky detail adds a layer of irony to this fear. Some pirates actually preferred certain towns over others for capture, because the hangman's skill varied. Inexperienced executioners might prolong suffering, while seasoned ones delivered a quick, almost merciful death. You shiver imagining the calculation that goes into choosing where to risk capture, turning something as terrifying as a public execution into a form of grim strategy. History reminds us that hanging was the preferred method of execution for pirates in many colonial territories. Sometimes the bodies were left to swing as warnings along harbors and docks, a macabre display meant to deter others from embracing a life of plunder. You feel the tension, imagining a bustling port town watching a pirate's final moments, whispers of fear and fascination blending into the salt-laden air. Scholars still debate whether these public displays truly curtailed piracy or merely added fuel to the legend. The mental weight of facing the noose changes behavior on board long before capture ever occurs. You sense the subtle hierarchy of caution forming among the crew, whispers about which captain is ruthless, which port has a faster hangman, and which allies might bribe authorities to delay justice. It's a web of fear, negotiation, and cunning that stretches far beyond any single ship, and you realize that survival depends as much on knowing the world ashore as mastering the sea. As you lean against the railing, lanterns flickering, you notice how the threat of death sharpens every decision aboard ship. Men handle weapons more carefully, check ropes twice, and negotiate plunder with extra caution. You feel the almost addictive tension of it, the constant awareness that death isn't a distant rumor, but a potential passenger aboard every voyage. And yet, pirates laughed in the face of this terror. You imagine them swapping stories of near captures over rum, exaggerating escapes, and mocking those who fell to the hangman. Fear was ever present, but camaraderie, dark humor, and sheer recklessness kept the crew together. By the time the moon dips behind clouds, you realize that the noose isn't just punishment. It's a thread woven into the fabric of pirate life, a constant reminder that freedom and death coexist on the same deck. The faint scent of salt and wood smoke drifts through the night as you wander the deck, stomach rumbling. Pirates aren't just fighting and scheming, they're eating. And what they eat is a story of ingenuity, desperation, and sometimes stomach-turning oddities. You peer into barrels, crates, and sacks, imagining the meals that sustain a crew living on the edge. Rum, salted meat, hardtack, and dried legumes are staples. And you realize the diet is as much about preservation as it is about taste. Scholars still argue whether pirates' diets contributed more to illness or survival on long voyages. Hardtack, a dense biscuit often baked until it's nearly rock hard, dominates their meals. You imagine gnawing at one, frustrated that it resists every bite, while salt pork is boiled or fried to make it more palatable. Oddly, pirates had some quirky habits around food. Some would soak hardtack in water or grog, turning it into a soggy, barely edible paste. You shiver thinking about swallowing such a meal, but also admire the resourcefulness. It's not gourmet, but it keeps men alive. Rum, of course, plays a dual role. It's both drink and antiseptic. Pirates consume it to celebrate, dull pain, or warm their bodies against the relentless cold nights at sea. You picture men toasting barrels of rum beneath the stars, laughter spilling over as they sing bawdy songs. And yet, it also preserves morale, an essential factor when hunger gnaws and danger prowls every wave. Here's a historical fact. Salted and preserved foods were crucial for long journeys because fresh provisions quickly spoiled aboard ships. Barrels of pickled vegetables, dried beans, and salted meats allowed crews to survive weeks or even months without fresh supplies. But the quality and taste left much to be desired. Scholars still debate how much nutritional deficiency contributed to scurvy, disease, and mortality among pirate crews versus natural aging and injuries. Quirky details abound. Pirates sometimes raided ships carrying exotic foods just to supplement their monotonous diet. Imagine a crate of lemons or a rare spice arriving aboard. It could spark arguments, celebrations, or even superstitions. Some pirates believed that unusual foods brought good luck, a charm against storms and capture. You feel the odd mix of practicality and superstition guiding daily life aboard. Food distribution follows the same meticulous logic as treasure division. Barrels are rolled out, rations measured, and special allowances made for officers or skilled specialists. You can almost hear grumbles as a few crew members claim extra hardtack or rum, debates flaring, only to be quelled by a quick reminder of the captain's authority or a whispered threat of punishment. Survival is intertwined with hierarchy, fairness, and occasional chaos. And then there's the magic of improvisation. When food runs low or becomes inedible, pirates employ remarkable creativity, boiling leather, soaking bread in seawater, or creating makeshift traps to catch birds or fish. You shiver, imagining a man dangling over the side of the ship, hoping his crude spear finds dinner. Hunger becomes a driver of ingenuity, a constant test of wit and endurance. As you settle near the railing, you feel the dual nature of pirate sustenance. Meals are survival and ritual, necessity and distraction, fuel and comfort. The smell of salt pork mingles with the sea breeze, reminding you that even the most grotesque diets are a lifeline. And as the moonlight glimmers off barrels and ropes, you realize that what pirates eat is inseparable from how they survive. A delicate balance of resourcefulness, luck, and the relentless will to stay alive until the next dawn. You wipe the sweat from your brow, imagining the unbearable thirst that gnaws at pirates when fresh water runs dry. The sea stretches endlessly, a glittering mirror of salt, and yet it is undrinkable. You feel the desperation, the gnawing knowledge that survival depends on ingenuity. Turning salt water into something potable is a skill born of necessity, a dance between danger and survival, and you sense the tension tightening around every crew member's mind. Scholars still argue whether these methods were widespread or the clever improvisations of only the most experienced captains. Pirates developed several strategies to cope. One of the most common was distillation, heating seawater and collecting the condensed vapor. You imagine the crew huddled around barrels, carefully pouring water, monitoring flames, and feeling the faint hope that this labor might stave off dehydration. It's a tedious, precarious process, but it demonstrates the resourcefulness of men who had little but the sea to rely upon. A quirky detail surfaces. Some pirates would collect rainwater whenever possible, storing it in barrels lined with cloth or leaves to keep it fresh longer. Others swore by adding certain plants to the water, believing they could remove the bite of salt or prevent sickness. You smile, shivering at the thought, imagining a man sipping a herbal-infused ration and declaring it fit for a king, even though the taste was barely better than seawater. Mainstream historical fact reminds us that fresh water storage was one of the most significant limitations of long sea voyages. Without access to rain or clever desalination, dehydration could decimate crews before a single battle or raid. Scholars still debate whether the occasional tales of miraculous survival were exaggerations or practical testimony to pirate ingenuity. Either way, you feel the weight of necessity pressing against every decision, every ration, every risk. You notice how desperate improvisation sometimes bordered on ritual. Water barrels were rotated, inspected, and carefully guarded. Crews developed a quasi-superstitious reverence for fresh water, as if losing it invited the wrath of the sea itself. You shiver, imagining someone secretly dipping their lips into the last ration, the silent fear of being caught adding a psychological strain to an already brutal existence. Pirates also relied on predictable supply points, friendly ports, secret coves, or captured ships. You sense the calculated tension as they plan a raid, not just for treasure, but for barrels of fresh water and food. Survival intertwines with strategy, making every attack a delicate balance between risk and necessity. Quirky as it may sound, Some pirates would even carry portable distillation setups hidden beneath the deck, like secret lifelines against nature's unforgiving reach. The duality is striking. The sea is simultaneously bounty and barrier. You stare at the endless horizon, imagining the clever improvisation and desperate tricks that keep men alive. Every sip of water, distilled from seawater, is a victory, a small rebellion against the merciless ocean. You feel the constant tension, a reminder that even as you dream of treasure and glory, the basics of survival are ever present, a silent test of wit, patience, and courage. As the night drifts deeper, lanterns flicker and shadows sway, and you understand that for pirates, water is as precious as gold, and ingenuity in survival is a treasure in its own right. Every drop preserved, every ration calculated, every clever trick, it's the invisible wealth that allows the ship and everyone aboard to continue chasing legends across endless waves. You feel the chill of the night seep into your bones as your thoughts drift toward the ship's surgeon. Life aboard a pirate vessel was brutal, and injuries were inevitable. Yet medical care was rudimentary at best. You picture a small, dimly lit cabin stacked with jars of herbs, splints, and crude surgical instruments. The surgeon's role is as much about survival as skill, improvising treatments that teeter between genius and desperation. Scholars still argue whether pirate surgeons were true professionals or clever amateurs who learned through necessity. Pirates relied on the surgeon to stitch wounds, set broken bones, and sometimes perform amputations when infection threatened a man's life. You imagine the tension as a sailor rides in pain while the surgeon works by lantern light, instruments glinting ominously. It's terrifying, but also fascinating. The line between life and death is drawn in the surgeon's hands. A quirky detail emerges. Some surgeons kept exotic concoctions on hand, believing that certain herbs could ward off infection or even improve morale. Imagine a jar of dried snakeskin or powdered coral used in poultices. Strange, almost magical remedies in a world dominated by violence and disease. You shiver, picturing men squinting at the mixtures, hoping for healing, yet aware that superstition and desperation mingle freely. Historical fact reminds you that survival often depended on cleanliness or the lack thereof. Pirates had minimal understanding of germs, yet some practices inadvertently reduced infection. Boiling water for dressings, cleaning wounds with alcohol, and rotating bandages. Scholars still debate whether survival rates were due to skill, luck, or simple practical hygiene. Either way, you sense the fragile balance that keeps the crew alive. You wander past, imagining the ship's small pharmacy. Crude tools, stained cloths, and jars labeled with barely legible handwriting. You note the improvisation required. A splint fashioned from a barrel stave, a bandage cut from an old shirt, herbs plucked from a hastily raided port. Even in the absence of proper medicine, creativity keeps men breathing. The surgeon also acts as a psychologist. You feel the weight of his role, comforting panicked sailors, managing fear, and maintaining morale while dealing with blood, sweat, and screaming. Oddly, some surgeons kept detailed notes or journals, recording injuries, treatments, and outcomes. These fragments now provide glimpses into the daily horrors and successes of pirate medicine. And yet, the surgeon's craft is not always enough. Infection, fever, and the relentless strain of sea life claim lives despite all ingenuity. You shiver imagining a man laid on the deck, the surgeon's hands trembling slightly as he works, hoping against hope that knowledge and improvisation can outweigh chance and circumstance. By the time you lean back against the railing, you feel a strange respect for the quiet heroism aboard. Survival at sea is as much about human ingenuity and resilience as it is about bravery in battle. Every stitched wound, every boiled poultice, every cautious movement toward recovery is a testament to the delicate, precarious balance between life and death. In this world, the surgeon's hands are as vital as any cutlass or cannon. The first hints of dawn creep across the horizon, painting the sky in muted shades of pink and gray. You squint against the growing light, imagining the crew stirring awake, weary but alive. Sleep is rare and precious, stolen between shifts and storms. Pirates often endured exhaustion as part of their survival, a constant test of endurance and alertness. Scholars still argue whether such fatigue contributed more to accidents and deaths than battle itself. Breakfast is a quick, hasty affair. A few bites of salted meat, soaked hardtack, and maybe a swig of watered-down rum. You watch the crew move with mechanical efficiency, eyes half closed but minds alert, each action choreographed by necessity. It strikes you that the rhythm of daily life aboard a pirate ship is part routine, part survival instinct. The line between discipline and chaos is thin and constantly shifting. Here's a quirky detail. Pirates sometimes measured watches not just in hours but in bell strikes, the ringing of the ship's bell every half hour. You imagine listening to the monotonous toll, a sound that structures life on a rolling vessel, counting time as carefully as any coin or ration. Oddly, it creates a sense of order amidst the chaos, a rhythm to anchor even the most exhausted sailor. Water collection is still critical. Rainwater barrels are checked, fresh seawater is distilled, and every drop is accounted for. You feel the tension as men peer over the side, scanning the horizon for clouds and signs of storms. Even a mundane task like rationing water becomes dramatic when survival is at stake. Scholars still debate whether pirates perfected these methods or simply adapted as needed, a testimony to human ingenuity under extreme pressure. The ship's layout itself is a lesson in survival. Below deck, barrels are stacked for balance, ropes coiled to prevent accidents, and cargo is arranged to maximize space. You notice the subtle hierarchy in movement. Officers and skilled crew handle delicate or dangerous tasks, while others haul, push, or maintain. Every action has consequences. A dropped barrel could injure or kill. A misread order could spell mutiny. Pirates are resourceful eaters. You imagine someone catching seabirds or fish, improvising with improvised hooks or nets, turning the ocean into a pantry. It's a constant struggle to keep nutrition adequate and morale intact. Oddly, some crews had rituals around eating, blessings for the first catch, or playful competitions to see who could snag dinner fastest. These moments are fleeting, but they humanize men otherwise defined by violence and risk. By mid-morning, the crew begins preparing for possible encounters. Sails are inspected, weapons checked, and the lookout scans tirelessly for approaching ships. You feel the palpable tension. Every ship on the horizon could be friend, foe, or prey. Life aboard is a blend of routine, improvisation, and constant readiness. Even in mundane tasks, danger lurks, keeping the crew alert and responsive. And so, the day begins. A cycle of hunger, vigilance, and survival that defines the pirate existence. You sense the intricate choreography, the delicate balance between order and chaos, life and death. Even as the sun climbs, you understand that survival at sea is never passive. Every movement, every decision, every rationed sip carries weight. The rhythm of the ship, the bell strikes, the sway of the deck, all form the pulse of life that keeps pirates moving forward, chasing treasure and evading fate. You notice the tension shift as the lookout spots a distant sail slicing across the horizon. Instantly, the ship transforms from a vessel of survival into a predator hunting prey. The crew scrambles, voices snapping commands, hands tightening on ropes and weapons. You feel the electric anticipation, a mix of adrenaline and calculated caution. Scholars still argue whether pirate raids were meticulously planned or opportunistic chaos, but the effect on the crew is the same. Hearts pounding, eyes sharp, every sense heightened. The target ship is likely carrying cargo worth risking life and liberty for. You imagine the captain studying the wind, the tides, and the enemy's movement, calculating angles and speed. Every detail matters. A wrong maneuver could spell disaster. You feel the tension in your chest, imagining the crackle of the rigging and the hiss of the sails as the pirate ship accelerates. The ocean itself becomes a participant, every wave both threat and ally. A quirky detail emerges. Some pirates used flags, not just for intimidation, but as psychological warfare. Flying a false flag, they could lure ships into a false sense of security before striking. You shiver at the deception, imagining the terror when the truth is revealed and the first cannonball screams toward the target. Strategy, theatrics, and raw audacity intermingle in ways both brilliant and deadly. Mainstream historical fact reminds you that attacks were carefully choreographed. Boarding parties were organized, weapons readied, in small boats deployed to surprise or overwhelm the enemy. You feel the meticulous planning as if you can step alongside the crew, imagining the anticipation, the whispered prayers, and the rush of adrenaline that comes with the first clash. Scholars still debate whether pirates were more successful due to fear, superior tactics, or sheer recklessness. The clash is a sensory overload. The roar of cannon, the smell of gunpowder, the shouts of men grappling with ropes and foes. You feel the chaotic ballet, the calculated violence mingling with raw instinct. Some pirates wield cutlasses with practiced ease, while others improvise with whatever they can grab: a broken plank, a rope coil, even their fists. The fight is brutal, short, and decisive. Oddly, humor sometimes punctuates violence. You imagine a pirate cracking a joke mid-boarding, a laugh cutting through chaos, a reminder that levity keeps fear at bay. Even in life or death moments, the human spirit sneaks in, teasing mortality with irreverence. It's a coping mechanism as old as piracy itself. As the battle subsides, the spoils are claimed. Barrels of food, chests of silver, and sometimes weapons are quickly inventoried and stowed. You sense the fragile rhythm of post-raid life settling in. Victory tempered by fatigue, relief mingled with the ever-present awareness that danger is never far. You lean against the railing and watch the horizon, realizing that every raid is a dance between skill, daring, and sheer luck, and that for pirates, survival, treasure, and reputation are inseparable. The adrenaline fades, leaving a heavy quiet on the ship. You wander toward the rail, watching the water shimmer silver under the afternoon sun. The chaos of battle is gone, replaced by the delicate balance of maintenance and survival. Every plank, rope, and sail demands attention, and the crew moves with mechanical precision. You feel the rhythm of the ship, the pulse of life that keeps the vessel afloat and the men alive. Scholars still argue whether the structure of pirate crews was born of necessity or clever improvisation. But the effect is undeniable. Efficiency born from danger. You notice the oddities that make pirate life unique. Some sailors take to minor repairs with a kind of obsessive precision, fashioning tools from scrap metal or carving intricate knots in ropes. You shiver, fascinated by the creativity that flourishes amidst constant threat. Even small acts, mending a sail or polishing a cutlass, carry meaning, a brief assertion of control in a world dominated by unpredictability. Mainstream historical fact. Ship maintenance was critical. A loose plank, a frayed rope, or a poorly set sail could mean disaster during storms or battle. You imagine the crew moving in a well-rehearsed dance, each man aware of the weight of his responsibility. Scholars still debate how much informal leadership influenced efficiency, versus strict adherence to codes. Either way, survival depends on attention to detail. Quirky detail. Pirates sometimes decorated their ships with personal touches, carvings, painted symbols, or small charms tied to rigging. You imagine a skull etched into a mast, or a bit of fabric fluttering from a rope as a talisman. These small rituals add personality to the vessel and serve as reminders of home, superstition, or past victories. The ship's cook begins preparations for a midday meal, boiling salted meat and hardtack over the open flame. You feel the odd comfort of routine, the smell of cooking meat blending with the salt air. Even modest meals are an anchor, providing energy, morale, and a sense of normalcy. Pirates might fight, steal, and plunder, but they still need food to keep bodies and spirits intact. Water remains precious. The crew inspects barrels, adds rainwater when available, and distills seawater if possible. You shiver, imagining how carefully each drop is rationed and counted. The invisible threads of survival woven through every sip. Scholars still argue whether these methods were sufficient to prevent dehydration or simply prolong discomfort until landfall. By afternoon, the ship hums with quiet productivity. Men repair, clean, and organize, while others rest or tend to personal rituals. You lean against the rail, feeling the ship's sway, the sun's warmth, and the quiet tension that underlies even moments of peace. It's a reminder that pirate life is a constant negotiation between survival and danger, between ingenuity and chaos. The duality is ever present. Every task, no matter how mundane, carries weight. Every repaired rope, every rationed bite, every precaution is a step toward survival. And as you watch the horizon, you realize that for pirates, life is never ordinary. It's a continuous balance between chaos and control, danger and routine, hunger and indulgence, death and a fleeting taste of freedom. As evening descends, you feel the temperature drop and the wind pick up, carrying the briny tang of the open sea. Shadows stretch long across the deck, and the ship creaks in rhythm with the waves. Nightfall brings a different kind of vigilance, one that blends fatigue with acute awareness. Pirates cannot afford to let down their guard, not even for a few hours of rest. You feel the tension of the night pressing in, a subtle reminder that danger rarely sleeps. Scholars still argue whether night watches were more about deterrence or superstition, but their necessity is unquestionable. The lookout climbs high into the rigging, scanning the horizon for sails, storms, or other threats. You imagine gripping the ropes, wind whipping your hair, muscles straining against gravity and sway. Being a lookout is a test of endurance and concentration, with any lapse potentially fatal. Quirky details emerge in these high vantage points. Sailors sometimes tied small charms or trinkets to their belts for luck, whispering prayers to gods, spirits, or ancestors as they strained their eyes across the darkened waves. Pirates also use the night for covert operations. You picture men slipping quietly into rowboats, guided by moonlight, ready to raid unsuspecting ships anchored in hidden coves. The stealth, the risk, and the thrill mingle into a potent mix. Scholars still debate how often such nocturnal raids succeeded versus turning disastrous, but the tales persist in the lore, painting night as a theater of ingenuity and terror. Back on deck, the crew prepares for sleep in shifts, ensuring someone is always alert. Hammocks sway, bodies curl up against the chill, and whispered conversations mix with the gentle lapping of water. You feel the strange intimacy of the night, vulnerability mingling with solidarity. Oddly, some pirates even kept personal journals or sketches in these hours, chronicling storms, encounters, or fleeting thoughts, a quiet rebellion against the chaos surrounding them. Food and drink take on different roles at night. The remaining rum is measured carefully, shared sparingly, to maintain warmth and morale. You shiver, imagining men sipping quietly, feeling comforted by the ritual despite its meager quantity. Even hardtack becomes a small pleasure when eaten in the glow of a lantern. Each bite a connection to life beyond the ocean's endless expanse. Medical care persists, albeit quietly. The ship's surgeon checks on men nursing injuries or illness, performing small interventions that could mean the difference between survival and infection. You sense the tension. A stitch, a poultice, or a dropped instrument could carry serious consequences. Scholars still argue how much survival depended on such care versus sheer luck, but the role is undeniably vital. As darkness deepens, the rhythm of the ship slows, yet the undercurrent of danger never ceases. You feel it in the sway of the deck, the distant splash of water, the whisper of wind through rigging. Life aboard a pirate ship is a continuous negotiation between rest and alertness, between comfort and survival. Night may offer calm, but it is never safe. A lesson every pirate learns and every outsider fears. The moon climbs higher, casting silver streaks across the restless waves. You lean over the railing, feeling the spray on your face, and realize that storms are as much a part of pirate life as treasure and battle. The sea can be both ally and enemy, unpredictable and relentless. Scholars still argue whether pirate success depended more on seamanship or sheer luck. But survival during a storm demands every ounce of skill, courage, and improvisation a crew can muster. You picture the wind howling through the rigging, sails snapping violently, and crew members bracing themselves against the deck. Every man has a role, securing lines, adjusting sails, pumping water, and steadying cargo. The chaos is breathtaking and terrifying. Quirky detail: some pirates tied small charms or coins into knots on ropes during storms, believing they would bring luck and calm the fury of the sea. You shiver, imagining the superstition mingling with raw necessity, a fusion of fear and hope. Storms force ingenuity. You imagine a captain barking orders, improvising new rigging setups, or directing men to plug leaks with spare wood and tar. Each decision is a gamble. Miscalculations can throw the ship off balance, damage essential equipment, or even claim lives. Scholars still debate how much preparation and ship design contributed to surviving these tempests versus the crew's skill in improvisation. Below deck, pirates work to secure cargo, prevent barrels from rolling, and maintain a fragile sense of order amidst chaos. You feel the claustrophobic tension as men brace themselves against walls, swinging with the ship's violent pitch. Every movement carries risk. Every task demands attention. Oddly, some sailors sang shanties during storms, using rhythm and song to coordinate labor while keeping fear at bay. The combination of music and necessity creates an almost hypnotic energy that carries the ship through turbulence. Food, water, and morale are strained during storms. Barrels may leak, meals become scarce, and rationing intensifies. You shiver, imagining men scraping together every bit of sustenance, savoring small victories, a hot spoonful of broth, a sip of rum, or the discovery that the water barrels remained intact. Even minor comforts become crucial psychological lifelines. Injuries spike during these violent hours. A slip on deck, a rope whipping back, or a barrel toppling can injure or kill. You sense the surgeon's tense vigilance as he treats cuts, bruises, and broken bones under flickering lantern light. Scholars still debate whether injury rates were significantly higher on pirate ships than in navies. But the combination of improvisation, danger, and minimal medical care made survival a constant challenge. By dawn, the storm passes, leaving the ship battered but afloat. You lean back, exhausted, yet awed by the crew's resilience. Every soaked man, torn sail, and damaged barrel is a testament to resourcefulness and endurance. The ocean has tested them, and they have endured, for now. You feel the fragility of life at sea, the thin line between survival and catastrophe, and understand why pirates develop superstitions, rituals, and clever solutions. Every storm is a reminder that freedom comes at a price, and that the sea is as unforgiving as any enemy. The morning after the storm is eerie in its calm. You step onto the deck, noticing the glistening salt water dripping from rigging and sails, and the fatigue etched into every sailor's face. Silence hangs heavy, interrupted only by the soft creak of the ship and distant calls of seabirds. Survival feels fragile. One misstep, one misjudged wave, and the ocean could claim everything. Scholars still argue whether post-storm discipline was maintained strictly or relaxed as relief settled over exhausted crews. But the balance between vigilance and exhaustion is palpable. You wander past the scattered debris, noting how pirates improvise repairs. Torn sails are patched with spare canvas, frayed ropes knotted and reinforced, and broken planks replaced with whatever is at hand. Oddly, some crews even decorated the repaired sections with crude symbols or marks, a small assertion of identity and defiance against nature's wrath. You shiver, imagining the blend of fear, pride, and ingenuity behind each patch. Food and water are rationed carefully after a storm. Salted meat may be soggy, hardtack damp, and barrels partially emptied by splashes, but resourcefulness reigns. You notice how small innovations, soaking biscuits in fresh rainwater, rotating barrels, using leftover scraps, preserve morale as much as nutrition. Scholars still debate whether such ingenuity significantly extended survival or merely delayed inevitable suffering. But it's clear that clever improvisation is vital. Pirates also repair weapons and equipment in these quiet hours. Swords are sharpened, muskets cleaned, and small artillery pieces inspected. You feel the meticulous attention to detail, the understanding that one neglected weapon could spell disaster in the next encounter. Quirky detail. Some pirates carve tiny charms or lucky symbols onto weapons, believing it improved aim or protected the wielder. You shiver, imagining this blend of superstition and practical necessity, guiding life at every moment. Above deck, the crew's routine slowly resumes. Men haul sails. Pirates often tell stories after storms, recounting narrow escapes and near-death experiences. You imagine their laughter, tinged with nervous energy, as exaggerated tales spread from one sailor to another. These stories serve dual purposes: entertainment and subtle warnings, reinforcing lessons learned the hard way. You feel the tension between relief and lingering fear, the reminder that the ocean's calm is only temporary. By afternoon, life aboard stabilizes, yet you sense the shadow of the storm lingering. Every decision, how to store water, where to patch sails, when to eat, carries weight. You realize that for pirates, survival is a continuous cycle: vigilance, improvisation, and risk management, punctuated by moments of rest and reflection. The ocean may be serene, but it's a deceptive piece, a fleeting interlude before the next challenge demands courage, skill, and ingenuity. As the day drifts into late afternoon, you feel the pulse of life aboard the ship settle into a tense rhythm. Pirates are masters of adaptation, and every decision is guided by survival, strategy, and the pursuit of treasure. You notice the crew scanning the horizon, sails adjusted for the shifting wind, every eye alert to the possibility of another ship, friend, foe, or prey. Scholars still argue whether pirate success was due more to cunning or luck. But you feel the delicate interplay of both as the crew maneuvers with practiced precision. You wander past the barrels and ropes, noting the subtle routines that keep life afloat. Water rationing continues, food stores are inventoried, and weapons are checked for rust or misfire. Oddly, some pirates develop personal superstitions around these tasks. A particular knot tied in a certain way, a coin placed in a barrel, or a ritual whistle before meals. You shiver imagining how superstition, fear, and necessity intertwine seamlessly in daily life. Treasure remains the ultimate motivator. You picture the captain poring over maps and charts, plotting potential targets and weighing risk against reward. The crew waits in silent anticipation, understanding that success could mean wealth and survival, while failure might bring punishment or death. Quirky detail: pirates sometimes held mock treasure trials, weighing small stolen goods or coins against maps and planning for raids, as if playing a high-stakes game. You feel the tension of possibility, mingling with careful calculation. Historical fact reminds you that pirates often operated with detailed agreements, sharing loot according to pre-established codes. This system maintained morale and prevented mutiny, though disputes still erupted. Scholars still debate whether these codes were rigid law or flexible guidelines, but their role in sustaining crews through danger and scarcity is clear. Below deck, sailors repair nets, sharpen tools, and maintain the ship's interior. You sense the quiet urgency. A single neglected task could have catastrophic consequences. Oddly, even in these moments of labor, humor and camaraderie persist. You imagine whispered jokes, playful pranks, and small competitions to lighten the monotony, a subtle resistance to the omnipresent tension. The sun begins to dip toward the horizon, casting gold across the waves. You lean on the railing, feeling the sway, listening to the distant gulls, and realizing the duality of pirate life: danger and ingenuity, fear and levity, chaos and meticulous order. Every action, from rationing water to plotting attacks, is a calculated move in the delicate dance of survival. Night approaches, and the horizon darkens. You sense that, for pirates, every dawn brings hope, and every dusk brings risk. The ocean is both a lifeline and a threat, and the ship itself is a fragile stage upon which survival, cunning, and luck perform an endless show. You shiver, captivated by the delicate tension, understanding that the pirate's life is a continuous test of ingenuity, courage, and adaptability, and that even when the sun sets, the lessons of survival linger in every shadow and ripple of the waves. The night falls like a velvet curtain, enveloping the ship in darkness. Lanterns sway softly, casting golden halos on the deck, and you feel the gentle but persistent sway of the vessel beneath your feet. This is the quiet moment before chaos, the fragile calm pirates cling to while plotting, resting, or simply trying to survive another day. Scholars still argue whether such nights were periods of reflection or just necessary vigilance, but you sense both: a time for introspection and preparation. You wander past the crew, some asleep in hammocks, others performing midnight duties with silent precision. Every movement is deliberate, adjusting sails, checking lines, rotating barrels of water and food, and keeping watch for hidden threats. Quirky detail: pirates sometimes hummed or whispered quietly to keep themselves alert, blending superstition and ritual with practical vigilance. You shiver, imagining these hushed tones echoing through the night, an invisible rhythm guiding survival. Pirates are not just fighters, they are inventors of improvisation. You notice repairs being made on the fly, torn sails patched with leftover canvas, frayed ropes reinforced with knots, and barrels secured against the sway of the waves. Mainstream historical fact confirms that survival at sea depended heavily on such ingenuity, and scholars still debate whether these practices were formalized or entirely adaptive. Regardless, their ingenuity is undeniable. The threat of other ships lingers in the shadows. Every silhouette on the horizon could spell danger or opportunity. You picture the lookout, perched high, eyes straining against the darkness, and the captain making calculated decisions based on instinct, observation, and whispered reports. Oddly, pirates often used signals, lantern patterns, flags, or sounds to communicate discreetly at night, a blend of creativity and necessity. You feel the tension of every decision, knowing that one misstep could cost the ship and everyone aboard. Food and water are rationed with even greater care under the cover of darkness. You sense the crew's reliance on ingenuity, makeshift cooking methods, careful distribution of remaining supplies, and creative ways to stretch each ration. Every sip, every bite is precious. Scholars still debate how pirates balanced scarcity with sustenance, but the practical lessons are clear. Survival depends on attention, cleverness, and a constant awareness of resources. As the hours drag on, stories and whispered jokes ripple through the ship. Tales of past raids, near escapes, and legendary treasures pass from one man to another. You shiver imagining the mixture of fear, relief, and camaraderie that sustains them. You lean against the railing, watching the moonlight ripple across the water. The ocean tonight, as the lanterns flicker and the waves whisper, you understand that the pirate's life is a delicate, thrilling, and terrifying dance with the sea, fate, and survival itself. And somewhere in the shadows, the lessons of courage, cunning, and endurance linger, ready to guide those daring enough to chase treasure, face danger, and survive another day. The ship rocks gently under the soft glow of the moon, and you take a slow breath, letting the tension of the day melt into the gentle rhythm of the waves. Lanterns flicker, casting long, wavering shadows across the deck, while the sea murmurs quietly, like a lullaby composed for restless souls. You feel the warmth of shared survival, the quiet bond of a crew that has faced storms, hunger, and danger together, even if only in imagination tonight. Below deck, hammocks sway as pirates rest, bodies curling into themselves, eyes closed against the chill. The creaking of ropes and the distant slap of waves become a soothing cadence, a reminder that life, even at sea, moves in rhythms both harsh and gentle. Oddly, the small, quirky routines, rotating barrels, knotting ropes, checking water, continue almost unconsciously, a quiet testament to habit and resilience. You drift past the memory of battles, storms, and clever survival tricks, letting the intensity of pirate life soften into reflection. You notice the way fear, humor, and ingenuity intertwine, how every challenge was met with creativity, courage, and occasional luck. Scholars still debate many details, yet the overarching truth is clear. Survival demanded a delicate balance of mind, body, and spirit. Now, imagine the soft wind brushing your face, the faint scent of salt in the air, and the comforting sway beneath your feet. The ocean, vast and endless, feels less threatening and more like a companion, guiding you gently through night's quiet hours. You sense the resilience of those who lived by wit, skill, and audacity, and perhaps even a hint of admiration for their ability to endure against constant peril. As your thoughts settle, like the stories fade softly into the background hum of the ship and sea, every lesson, every raid, every rationed sip, and clever trick dissolves into a soothing rhythm, easing your mind. You feel the tension release, replaced by a gentle calm, a reminder that even in chaos, there is space for reflection, for comfort, for rest. Close your eyes and let the whisper of waves and creaking timbers lull you. You've traveled through storms, raids, ingenuity, and survival. You've glimpsed the world of pirates, not just their terror and daring, but the clever human spirit that kept them alive. And now, as night deepens, rest comes easy, soft, and quiet. End of script. Sweet dreams.